Stop crying, look at my face. That did for no reason, bro. You chose your destiny. I did not, I backed up.
Going in the refrigerator, eating stuff out of the refrigerator, it was very unprofessional.
I'm not trying to intimidate you.
So why are you so close to me?
Okay, give me your ID. You've interfered with an investigation. If you refuse to give me your ID, you're going to jail.
Why you giving me the finger? What? What's your problem? What? Why you giving me the finger?
Put him in my shirt.
In June 2008, a law enforcement team called the Omni Drug Task Force, led by Lieutenant Luke Davis of the Michigan State Police, conducted a raid at the home of a resident named Rudy Simpson. Rudy explained that the police showed up while he and his band members were rehearsing for a live performance. The search warrant used to raid Rudy's house was obtained based on an anonymous tip regarding the presence of marijuana. Following the raid, Rudy and his friends were taken to an upstairs area while other police officers remained in the studio. Rudy then proceeded to describe the behavior of the police officers as follows.
Very unprofessional, almost thuggish. I felt violated and almost like if it was a game to them.
According to one of Rudy's friends, some of the officers took turns using the studio equipment to sing songs, while the rest of them were busy searching his house. Additionally, a few of the cops even went into the kitchen and started eating cookies.
Going in the refrigerator, eating stuff out of the refrigerator, it was very unprofessional.
Unbeknownst to the police officers, their every single word was being recorded by the studio's microphones. The officers stated that they discovered a small amount of marijuana and half a pain pill during the search. However, Rudy later proved that he had a valid prescription for the pain pill. According to Rudy, the cops seemed more interested in his belongings than actually finding drugs. He claimed that they kept discussing ways to justify taking his music equipment. All the while, their conversations were being captured on the studio's microphones.
Well, we keep a bunch of moves, right? I don't know where we at. I guess that's Luke's fault, not mine. I was just trying to get the bail on our lunch. Yeah, well, Luke comes down here and don't want to take it.
Well, it wasn't just talk. The police officers took serious action. They ended up confiscating several valuable items from Rudy's home, including a 52-inch flat-screen television, a DVD player, 2 computers, a camera, and numerous DVDs. However, according to the law, the police are only allowed to seize property that was bought with money earned from drug sales, and only after the suspect has been proven to be involved in such activities. In Rudy's case, though they found marijuana, there was no reason to believe he had been selling drugs. As it turned out, Rudy wasn't the only victim of the misconduct by Lieutenant Luke Davis. The Michigan State Police conducted a secret investigation after receiving multiple complaints about Davis's behavior. The investigation exposed Davis's corruption, along with incriminating comments. Not only Davis, but also another officer, Emmanuel Rappolier, and a Monroe County resident named Lawrence Dussault were involved in a scheme to seize people's property for years. The investigation uncovered a massive property embezzlement scheme involving Davis and his associates. According to court records, when the police searched Davis's house, they discovered a wall covered with stolen men's and women's jewelry, along with 22 cell phones, 30 designer purses, televisions, computers, motorcycles, and even a golf cart. The investigation revealed that Davis had abused his power. The Michigan State Police policy dictates that seized property must be either sold at auction, used for official purposes, or destroyed. However, Davis began keeping the seized items for personal use. Attorney General Bill Shute revealed that Dussault acted as a straw buyer for Davis. Dussault would dishonestly purchase the property at auctions, and later they would sell it to a third party, splitting the profits among themselves. Officer Rappolier also played a part in the scheme by creating false receipts of Dussault's purchases at auctions. As a result of their actions, Davis was sentenced to 20 years in jail after pleading guilty to 1 charge of racketeering. Rappolier received a sentence of 3 years of probation and 28 hours of community service. Lawrence Dussault, on the other hand, was sentenced to 2 years of probation. Besides being imprisoned, both Davis and Rappolier were fired from their positions in the Michigan State Police. The crimes committed by these police officers are comparable to the criminal records of some of the most notorious offenders you could ever encounter.
You have a gun in probably, I would say 2 1/4 just by looking at it.
Detective Marcus Taylor, who headed the Baltimore Police Gun Chase Task Force, has been sentenced to 18 years in jail for a series of serious crimes. These offenses involve planting false evidence, committing 10 armed robberies, falsifying overtime records, and engaging in the sale of drugs, including stolen prescription medications worth $1 million taken from pharmacies. This extensive list of criminal activities reveals that he is not just a police officer, but rather lawbreakers who are even worse than the very criminals they were supposed to protect the people from.
7 years later, we find out that corrupt cops who swore to protect were nothing more than criminals.
Another member of the task force received a 25-year prison sentence. Although he offered an apology in court, many people are skeptical about its sincerity. As a result of such actions, public confidence in the police has become quite uncertain. With officers involved in these kinds of incidents, it raises doubts about whether we can truly trust the police in general.
5 Miami Beach officers facing serious charges after a rough arrest, and we're now learning more about those allegations against them through their own arrest forms.
On the night of July 26, 2021, a black man named Khalid Vaughn witnessed an arrest taking place inside the Royal Palm Hotel in South Beach and decided to record it using his phone. However, he had no idea that he would become the next target of the Miami Beach police officers. They were in the process of arresting a man named Delanta Crudup, who was accused of a scooter parking violation. When the officers noticed Vaughn filming them, they reacted negatively. After they managed to secure and handcuff Crudup, all 5 cops turned their aggression towards Vaughn, catching him completely off guard. They tackled him violently, and despite handcuffing him, the situation didn't end there. The body camera footage from one of the officers involved in the incident showed Vaughn sitting on the floor, handcuffed, with blood dripping from his face, indicating the severity of the brutal treatment he endured. The police officers didn't want Vaughn to film them because they were using unnecessary and excessive force while arresting Crudup. During the arrest, one of the officers slammed Crudup's head to the ground and even pointed a gun at him, which was highly concerning. Surprisingly, the officers didn't see anything wrong with their actions and treated Vaughn in a similar aggressive manner. On the body camera recording, Vaughn's voice can be heard saying, "You did that for no reason," expressing his disbelief and frustration at the officer's unjustified behavior.
20 of y'all. While I'm backing up. It's on camera.
While Vaughn was recounting his experience, one of the cops interrupted him and callously said, "Stop crying." In response, Vaughn had something to say.
Stop crying, look at my face. That did for no reason, bro. You chose your destiny.
Not only that, but one of the officers also went on to say that Vaughn had chosen his own destiny, although it's unclear what he meant by that. As if that wasn't enough, another officer took Vaughn's Gatorade and drank it right in front of him, even making satisfied noises afterward, all of which was caught on camera. Despite Vaughn's pleas to be taken to the hospital due to his injuries and bleeding, the officers ignored his requests. However, the public didn't turn a blind eye to the incident. When the Miami Police Department released the body camera footage, it sparked widespread outrage across the country. Millions of people took to social media, demanding that action be taken against these heartless officers. Vaughn took a stand and filed a lawsuit against all 5 officers involved in his arrest, stating that they had violated his First Amendment rights. He made it clear that he was an activist and was not obstructing the police's work in any way. With the support of millions, Vaughn's case gained significant attention, leading to all the officers involved being charged with battery. Additionally, 3 of them faced felony charges as a consequence of their actions.
An arrest of a criminal suspect into an ongoing investigation of the use of force by 5 Miami Beach police officers, leading to their being criminally charged.
Let's explore whether Vaughn actually broke any laws or if he was truly interfering with police activity. It's important to note that in Florida, just like in other states, it is completely legal to film a police officer in public spaces. This right is protected by the First Amendment, which safeguards freedom of speech. To eliminate any doubt, a significant legal precedent was set in 2011 when the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit, with jurisdiction over Florida, ruled in the case of Smith versus City of that the First Amendment indeed protects the right to record public officials, including police officers, while they perform their duties in public spaces. The reason for the officer's excessive use of force against Vaughn might have been because he was recording the brutal arrest of Crudup, and the officers were worried that the footage could become public and cause trouble for them. Regardless of their attempts to silence Vaughn, their actions were ultimately exposed, and they faced serious consequences as a result. In the video, we can observe the police car driving along the road when suddenly, someone seems to show disrespect to the officer by raising their middle finger. The officer takes offense to this gesture and decides to stop.
Why you giving me the finger? What? What's your problem? What? Why you giving me the finger?
The young man insists that he didn't do anything wrong and starts to walk away, but not without loudly swearing, which angers the police even further.
Reason? Because you're giving me the finger. That's legal. No, it isn't.
After the incident, the officer goes after the boy and decides to handcuff him just because he was using foul language, which is quite ridiculous, I agree. Unfortunately, the body camera footage becomes unclear at this point as the cop hastily switches it off. He only turns the body camera back on when backup arrives. And it's during this time that the officer starts making up several false charges, like causing a public disturbance and using offensive language in public.
You are cursing in public. You are causing a public disturbance. You're being a nuisance to the public.
In what way? When he was driving past?
It would be amusing if it wasn't such a clear abuse of authority. The remarkable aspect of this situation is that the person involved knows their rights and refuses to be intimidated by the officers.
A crooked cop is caught in the act on his own body camera video. The key piece of evidence led to the conviction of a former MTSU police officer just this month.
Now, the case started with a missing AR-15, and as News Channel 5's Nick Barris shows us, it ended with an elaborate sting, all caught on camera.
Following the disappearance of an AR-15 from the NTSU police locker, the police chief, Buddy Peaster, had suspicions that Officer Marco Burke might be responsible for the theft. To investigate this further, Chief Peaster devised an on-campus sting operation. He asked Burke to look into a supposedly abandoned vehicle. While conducting the search, Burke's body camera captured him taking $1,100 in cash and a bottle of pills, placing them in his pocket. After completing the search, Burke reported to dispatch, stating that he hadn't discovered anything significant during the investigation.
Just the vehicle is unoccupied. That's it.
After reporting to dispatch, Burke returned to his car, and his body camera picked up the sound of papers shuffling, indicating that he might be counting the money he had taken from the vehicle. This was the moment Chief Peaster had been anticipating. He had set a trap, and it successfully revealed Burke's lack of integrity. Despite giving Burke a day to turn in the items he had found during the search, he failed to do so. As a result, the police decided to arrest him and took him to Rutherford County Jail, where he had the opportunity to make a phone call to his wife.
Caught up in something, and I got in trouble. I know what I did. He did his thing, and I got caught. So I'm here.
The police had set up hidden cameras to secretly record Burke's actions, but it was his own body camera that ultimately exposed the true nature of this corrupt cop. When questioned about why he kept his camera on during the theft, Chief Peaster explained that it might have been a habit from his training, and he turned it on without really thinking about it. Burke faced charges of misconduct and was brought to court, where the prosecutors questioned him about the stolen AR-15. Burke denied any involvement in stealing the weapon, and while he wasn't charged specifically for the theft of the AR-15 since it hadn't been recovered, he did plead no contest to 3 felony charges. He was convicted of tampering with evidence and is now facing a potential prison sentence of 3 to 15 years. Chief Peaster expressed his disappointment, telling Burke that he had become the kind of person he was supposed to protect the community from. The chief emphasized that even though they didn't recover the stolen weapon, the sting operation still achieved its goal by exposing an officer who had turned corrupt. Despite being proven to steal only once, Burke's actions had severe consequences for him. This afternoon, it's evident that Lieutenant Brian Philip Hayek from the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department is heavily intoxicated.
Why I'm stopping you is we got multiple reckless driving calls.
It's quite apparent from his behavior and attitude as the officers question him that Lieutenant Brian Philip Hayek is under the influence of alcohol. You would expect a law enforcement officer to understand the seriousness of drinking and driving.
I asked you to step out of the vehicle.
The officer who pulled him over explains that they received several 911 calls reporting a drunk driver. You can see the officer attempting to use his authority to avoid consequences, but the arresting officer remains firm and doesn't allow any special treatment.
I'm not losing my career over you.
This video displays both the positive and negative aspects of the police force.
It will make me lose my career over you. So I'm gonna ask you one more time, step out of this vehicle nicely.
The lieutenant stubbornly refuses to step out of his vehicle for an extended period, trying to use his status as a fellow police officer to avoid consequences. It's only when the officers threaten to use a taser on him that he finally complies and gets out of the vehicle. A general rule of thumb is that police officers who vehemently object or become extremely upset when they are being recorded are often engaged in some form of unlawful activity.
You're a passenger, you don't have to identify.
In the video, you can hear a person on the sidewalk calling out to the people in the car, not with malicious intent, but to inform them about the law. They advise the occupants that if you're a passenger, you don't have to provide identification.
Now breaking the law, you're interfering with the
Voice alone can't be deemed interfering.
The officers who were acting unlawfully took offense at the bystander's advice and immediately confronted him, yelling that he was interfering with their duties.
I'm not trying to intimidate you.
So why are you so close to me?
Okay, give me your ID. You've interfered with an investigation. If you refuse to give me your ID, you're going to...
Observe as the person being confronted by the officers explains that they haven't interfered with anything, as merely using their voice is not considered interference. It's noteworthy that initially, the officer instructs the person to move out of the way, but in the very next moment, demands to see their identification and proceeds to arrest them. This behavior raises questions about abusing power and acting with arrogance. Furthermore, the officers even confiscated the person's phone and turned it off. Police are meant to protect and serve the public, but when they start avoiding cameras to hide their actions, it raises concerns. In the video, you can observe an officer displaying signs of worry about the cameras in the store. His furtive movements, constantly shifting eyes, and body language indicate that he and his narcotics team don't want their activities to be recorded. He makes an attempt to reposition the camera but fails initially. When his colleagues join him, he tries again, and this time he successfully adjusts the camera, ending the video. Such behavior raises questions about transparency and accountability in law enforcement.
7 or 8 eyes. Listen to me, there's one outside, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 in the aisles, and there's one right here somewhere.
Why would police officers be cautious or hesitant about cameras? When this police officer pulled over the driver, it was anticipated that the typical interaction between a driver and a cop would occur.
What's going on?
I'll be happy to tell you once I see who I'm talking to, all right?
However, what unfolds is a display of ego and a chaotic arrest that could have been handled more effectively if the officer didn't believe he had absolute authority to act as he wishes.
You just let me know, like, what's going on, like, what happened?
Like I said, I'd be happy to tell you once I see information.
The officer requested the driver's identification, and in response, the driver asked to know the reason for the stop. The officer didn't respond kindly. He believed the driver should obey his commands without questioning. This behavior resembles that of a classic dictator, but that's just the beginning of the troubling situation.
I'm not giving you my information until you tell me what you pulled me over for.
Now, the officer seems determined to show the driver a lesson in manners and calls for backup. What follows is a complete and violent incident where the officer smashes the glass using his hand and forcefully drags the driver out of the car with the assistance of his partner. It's disheartening to think that instead of diffusing the situation, some officers choose to escalate it. In this video, you can see a Metro police officers attempting to solicit bribes from motorists. Unfortunately, this is a widespread issue, and as evident in this particular frame, one officer is seen trying to obtain a bribe from an individual who refuses, and instead asks to see the officer's badge number.
You saying that we can sort out like this?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so what happens if I say, can I get your badge number?
After being caught, he was arrested, but surprisingly, the police claim that the officer won't be fired for attempting to solicit a bribe. They argue that he can only be dismissed if he actually receives money in exchange for the bribe.
There's no money exchanged, then it can't be corruption. But however, there can still be misconduct on the part of the officer that can be investigated.
It seems like they are more inclined to conceal the incident rather than take appropriate action. On video, a corrupt officer at Homestead can be seen forcefully pushing an inmate headfirst into a wall.
I don't tolerate
this kind of behavior from our police officers.
In the video, there is footage of the officer escorting the inmate into the booking area. Once inside, there is no visible provocation, no verbal exchange, and the handcuffed inmate doesn't make any attempts to escape. However, suddenly, the officer shoves the inmate forcefully from behind, causing him to crash headfirst into a concrete wall. The moment of impact is too graphic to be shown. The inmate, who is a black male, BMA, had to be taken to the hospital as a result of the incident, as he started bleeding from the head.
Charging Homestead Police Officer Lester Brown with felony battery, which is a third-degree felony, and official misconduct, which is also a third-degree felony.
The officer falsified the incident in his arrest report, claiming that the inmate was combative and attempted to attack the officers, which is all untrue as the video clearly demonstrates. It's crucial to highlight that this inmate wasn't a hardened criminal. Instead, he was arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct. When these 3 constables were dispatched to serve an eviction notice, their behavior turned into a complete mockery of what they were supposed to stand for. It's disheartening to witness law enforcement officials deviate from their duty to protect citizens and instead engage in actions that betray their responsibility, such as stealing from the very people they are meant to safeguard.
Put him in my shirt.
To illustrate their irresponsibility, it turns out that one of their body cameras was accidentally left on, and it recorded the officers stealing items from the house where they had served an eviction notice. From wristwatches to other valuable belongings inside the home, you can hear the female officer's excited voice as they search through the house, behaving like common thieves.
We done got hot. They can come in. Yeah, it's hot.
These individuals are even worse than thieves or criminals. The important takeaway from all this is that they were held accountable and faced the consequences for their actions.